Welcome to another installment of the Navigating Business Decisions video series. This is part 11 in the discussion that I'm doing on a final report of a study that was done in Northeast Ohio with a group of Kent State University students, where we asked business owners in Northeast Ohio how they make decisions and what they are choosing to do when they have challenging times, how they face those decisions, what tools they use, and how they are managing the responsibilities of making decisions within their team. So I interviewed 7 of the 53 respondents in individual discussions with them apart from the survey. I wanted to add some context, to get some insights from them and also some quotes, and these quotes are then categorized into sections. In the last video, I went over growth strategy and market positioning, and then workforce development education. So today I'm going to review financial health and risk management and a couple other sections. These, again, are quotes from business leaders who are in Northeast Ohio who offer additional thoughts about their point of view on making decisions. So when it comes to profitability and trying to keep their company healthy for the long term, how are they managing these things? Cash flow was one of the challenges that came up quite frequently in the survey. And also trying to keep debt low was a priority. Sustainable growth was also mentioned several different times by many owners. So these are some quotes that were shared with me from some of these owners. Making a profit is where we struggle. It's so hard to stay ahead of competitors when they can buy truckloads of bulk materials and just sit on it. So this is from an owner who is having trouble with the challenge of staying ahead of competition and also having enough raw materials to continue to build products that are available for the market rather than waiting until the price goes up. There's just such a fine balance between trying to figure out how many resources to have on hand with raw materials versus stocking up so much that you are spending a lot more on that than having cash flow available for the other expenses in the business. And some of the smaller companies especially are really struggling with that. Next quote, I think it's important to be responsible for what you're borrowing and not get in too much debt. Make sure your growth is incremental so you don't get in over your head. I 100% agree with this person. There did seem to be a theme, especially in Northeast Ohio-based business owners and leaders, that getting into too much debt is detrimental, and I totally agree, don't you? Debt can be a useful tool, but it can also be a noose around your neck as an owner, especially if things do not work out the way that you are expecting, or if there's a downturn in sales or economic shifts or prices shoot up. That can create such a tight margin that you just don't have enough to stay ahead of even the minimum payments, and then that just becomes a cycle of unhappiness. So I really agree with this idea of staying in a responsible position and incremental growth, because growth can be harmful, in my opinion. If it's not healthy and it's not in a balanced way, there can actually be a lot of negative outcomes that come from growing a business too quickly. Next quote, expansion requires cash, which is often limited. We had to be really careful where we spend our development and investment dollars. Again, the decisions of where to spend your money when it comes to, everybody else is putting technology in that we have barely even looked at. Let's quickly implement a new ERP system. And as we noticed, 64% of all of our respondents are using intuition and gut feeling primarily for their business decisions. And yet the data-driven tools can actually help to add more clarity on how those decisions could actually potentially be the wrong ones in context. So it may feel good in the moment, it may make sense gut-wise, but if the data is showing that something else is happening and there are other factors, it's better to have those additional data points and even outside perspectives to get more information that can be useful in making these decisions. So with expansion, you really do have to be careful where you spend that money, because you can only spend it once. And once it's been spent, you have to wait to have more available before you can invest again. One thing that I have noticed a lot is some regret about purchasing things that were not as useful as they should have been. Hindsight's 20/20, and it's easier to look back and judge previous decisions. Obviously, we don't want to live in the past, but it really is helpful to make assessments based on previous choices and see what patterns of behavior could be driving those. We tend to make the same types of decisions over time because it's more comfortable than changing everything about how we go through life. So if you can analyze how you're making those decisions and what's creating the thought process, that you then feel confident you are making choices for the betterment of your business for long-term growth rather than just something short-term that feels much more comfortable. Okay, next quote. We've had to be careful with new product development because sometimes it can hurt our existing products, cost a lot of lost revenue on one side, and lose investment on the other. So this has to do with, we mentioned before, the potential for new innovations to cannibalize certain parts of a business unintentionally from inside the business. So rather than expanding and increasing your product offerings or services to increase your revenue, but also potentially have higher profit margins, it actually could be decreasing the profit margins because you're actually pulling materials, products, or ideas or sales from another aspect of your business. So this is called internal cannibalization. It is not a pretty thing to watch. It's not useful for companies that want to grow in a healthy way. Next, estate planning is brutal. Financial planning is the new accounting. I recommend everyone get their financial affairs in order before you think you need to. Wise words. Estate planning, this person was talking about a family business and the potential for that to be passed on and some frustrations about how that was happening. Also, of course, business owners who are quite successful have the challenge of knowing how to create value for their family once they no longer have the business itself, which eventually happens to everyone. You cannot own a business forever. It does eventually change hands, and you can control how that happens if you plan ahead. But a lot of business owners I talk to are not necessarily as willing to have that discussion and maybe more in denial about how much control they have. And yet all of us have limited time on earth and we could just have situations occur outside of control. I've definitely seen it happen. Heart attack, unexpected emergencies, family issues. There are many situations that can cause a business to fail rapidly. And a lot of it has to do with how the owner has positioned it to go primarily through them as the bottleneck for decisions. So one thing that's really useful is to set up your company so that you have multiple ways for the business to run, even without key individuals who may currently be the only ones who can do that position and control pretty much how the company can run. That is a really risky way to run a business, and yet it happens so often that you rely on primarily one or two individuals for the company to exist, and without them it wouldn't be able to function. So that means that the valuation of the company is going to be very low if you try to transfer that to someone else without that person staying in that position, which most of the time when you transfer a company, you are not including everyone in all of the positions once you transfer. So especially the owner has to either leave altogether or is going to go through a process of kind of handing over their leadership role as the company moves into another owner or leadership team. So it's not a fun conversation. I totally understand and I empathize with the emotional part of trying to give up that control. But again, it's brutal either way. So it's either painful when you're planning it, but then at least you have some clarity and you can kind of breathe easier, or you have the pain of this happening to you without much control later. So really, I think it's a better idea to do this ahead of time. Okay, for work-life balance and personal reflection. So these are some ways that these owners are talking about how the business affects their personal life. Once I made some changes and pulled back from working 24/7, I realized that the money was great, but the stress was going to kill me. The illusion of success came at a price to my health and family, and now it's like night and day. So again, wise words from someone who decided to reevaluate what was important and to calibrate their business so that it actually served their needs. Being an entrepreneur is something that started early in my life with paper routes and summer jobs. I have met a lot of business owners who have wanted to own a business from when they were very young, and it's kind of obvious to see their progression through that. The next step for me is retirement. I've had multiple health issues, and I'm ready to give up the 60-hour weeks and move on to something else that keeps me busy and where I can be needed. I've noticed a very strong theme through most of the owners that I talk to about the concern that they will not be needed once they leave a business that they've started and added their blood, sweat, and tears to and increased the valuation of. It's not just about the finances. It's not just about their ability to provide value. It's also about their need to feel like what they're doing in the business is who they are. And if they were no longer part of it, they don't know what that identity is. So this is a really common challenge of not just the problem of retirement and all of a sudden having nothing to do, but it's also the identity shift from you're the one person who can make all the decisions in the business. You've been asked for your opinion for years. You've created things that no one else has done. You've watched something come out of nothing and created all this enormous benefit to so many people. And yet then when you give it up, who are you? So this identity shift is something that's really difficult for a lot of business owners, and also 60-hour weeks. I mean, I think most people would want to give that up at some point, but then what are you moving on to? So building some sort of plan for what to do after being that business owner and the enormous amount of stress and pressure is important, or there could be some problems adjusting to that new version of yourself. Then my business has been very good to me. I have achieved all the goals I set out to do, even though we've faced health issues and problems. Very nice to hear that this person has achieved the things that they want to. That's ultimately the goal that I think every owner wants to have, is checking things off their list, feeling satisfied with their investment and the risks that they took earlier on in their career to develop a business that may not have had a chance to succeed, and yet they pushed through all those challenges and now they have something to show for it. And not just financially, but also in terms of a legacy they can leave and the satisfaction of knowing that they built something that can help other people. Leadership and team development. So building teams, as we've talked about in previous videos, is a very important part of running a business effectively. And to do that, you have to have a combination of skills. You have to be able to inspire people to follow you. You have to be able to manage people effectively. You need to gain their trust. You need to know who to pick for the right roles. You need to build a culture that's going to engage people, but also align with your core values. It's difficult. And also make sure that those people continue working. So when the cat's away, the mice will play. I mean, that's been a very common theme that I've seen sometimes. So here's some quotes. My goal is to set every worker up for a successful trajectory. I make sure they get the training and help they need to be happy while they're working with our company. I'm just really inspired by this kind of leader. This person who shared this is the kind of person that most folks would want to work for, when they care enough about workers under them succeeding and providing anything that they need to be successful, and adding value to workers is I think that's just a very, very inspiring way to run a company, rather than seeing employees as just functioning in order to make the owner successful, which a lot of employees feel that way, even if it's not true. This shows that the owner has taken the time to consider how that would feel and to basically do the reverse of demonstrating that every worker needs to have a path that that owner is then responsible to help them reach. We focused on developing the next generation of employees and preparing for the transition to a new CEO. So as I mentioned in the previous section, this is a goal that every owner should have, of how do you transition out of your role. If you are the CEO, who would be replacing you at some point? How is that transition going to happen? And also, of course, they're focused on the next generation, and this is a very common theme as well. It's really difficult to keep employees working for their entire career path and not expect there to be some transition and turnover. And basically, eventually you have to hire people who are younger, and many generational differences can create tension and problems, especially if they're not identified and dealt with. And it's hard to understand generations that are younger if you haven't taken the time to really to identify what makes them motivated and how to inspire them, how to make sure that they feel part of the company and can provide the kind of outcomes that you want from them, but also that you're giving them, as this person here mentioned, that they also feel that their success is important to you as the owner or leader. Another quote, "A great part of being a business owner is watching people grow. We've had years where we weren't as profitable because we invested in specialized training and new equipment, and that has really paid off." So another great quote about return on investment of putting money in places where it may not show that it's worthwhile short term, but eventually it comes back and adds a lot more value. So I am pretty sure that this company is going to have a lot of valuation improvement because they are looking ahead to future growth potential, even beyond what the owner may experience personally. So this business is definitely set up for a long-term trajectory of healthy growth. My guys stay because I've earned their trust. That's the most important thing you can do as a leader. Be worthy of trust and take good care of your people. Again, something I really agree with. So that's it for this section. Next, I'm going to talk about legacy and generational changes. So be sure to check back, subscribe to this channel if you want to see more videos like this. Again, if you want the entire report, you can go to laconteconsulting.com/Ohio-survey. And be sure to leave a comment if you have any comments or questions or just want to interact with this material. I hope these quotes are inspiring to you. I really appreciate you checking out this video.